Day 21. Gladly we've made it a few days without incident after my encounter with a creature, of which I still have no name for. We haven't seen any since, but we've heard them outside, and noticed they tend to become more vocal at night. I thought many times to myself since my supply run to the neighbor's house of what horrors I might have found in the last 2 rooms in the second-floor hallway. I only made it halfway down the hall before running into and fighting the creature. What happened to Eric? Or the kids? These were questions that kept surfacing in my mind, but I wasn't sure I really wanted to know the answer to. Thanks to my expedition, we now had a bow and a set of arrows, as well as a healthier supply of food. This, however, was only a temporary solution in my mind. For one reason was that I knew I was pretty much shit with a bow, having very little practice with one. I also knew that we really couldn't stay here. I knew it. Grace knew it. I had to find a way to get out of this town, somewhere more secure. But how? My truck isn't strong enough to push Humvees out of the way, and there isn't enough room to go around them. I sat on the couch with Addie. She played on her tablet. The girls have been so well behaved during this whole ordeal so far. Now I'm thankful that even though they don't really know what's going on, they're listening well and being quiet, and we need them to be for safety. The dogs, on the other hand, they've acted almost completely oblivious to what's going on, except for a few moments when they barked. We needed them to be quiet. Thankfully, they haven't caused any huge problems, and they quiet down rather quickly. Just as I was thinking that, I hear Grace whisper from the upstairs room, "Trevin! Front door, bring me Addie." I shut up, grabbed Addie, carrying her to Grace as she moved the girls upstairs, and as I handed her Addie, I turned to the door. I saw what she was signaling me for. One of the creatures had made its way up on the porch and was pacing around. I moved to the kitchen and I grabbed the bow off the top of the fridge along with a handful of arrows. Having the tips screwed on previously in preparation, I moved up to the front door and unlocked it, and opened it while the creature was at the far end of the porch. I backed up about 10 feet and took a knee, nocking an arrow and drawing back, aimed at the front door. One of the things I learned on my supply run was the creatures seemed to be blind, and they did their hunting through sound mostly and possibly smell. As long as I was quiet, I could at least get one solid shot off before it knew I was there. I sat in silence, bow drawn, waiting. The creature slowly walked to the doorway and stepped past the threshold. I clicked my tongue and the beast froze and focused its head directly at the sound and directly at me. At that split second, I released it and let fly the arrow. I had aimed for its nose slits but missed the mark, but did make contact. It hit the creature in the shoulder and buried itself halfway in. The creature let out a shriek as I knocked another arrow and drew back. Drawing the bow each time felt like fresh knives being stabbed into my wounded shoulder. Firing a second time and hitting my mark this time, dropping the beast where it stood. As it hit the ground, it released plumes of purplish-gray fog into the air and upsettingly into our house. I got off my knee and fully sat down, just relaxing, letting my heart settle back down from the suspense. As I stared at the now-dead creature blocking my open front door, I heard movement on the steps, and very shortly after, the door to the steps slowly creaked open. Through the slit, I met eyes with my wife, and since she saw I was sitting calmly, she opened the door the rest of the way and stepped into the room. Dogs and girls were in Addie's room playing quietly. She answered my question before I even asked it, just seeing that it was on my mind by the looks of my eyes. This being the first time Grace had an up-close look at one of the creatures, she walked up to it to inspect it. "Is this just like the other fog lurker thing you fought over at Eric's?" she asked as she knelt down to look at its unusual form. Yeah, I was much more ready for this thing this time," I confirmed, as I began to stand up. "We need to move that body out." "Holy shit!" Grace interrupted me as she grabbed one of the arrows protruding from the fog lurker and ripped it out as she runs back towards me. She covered half the distance between us before I saw one of the raccoon-sized flaming spider creatures run through the doorway towards us. I knelt to grab another arrow lying by my side on the ground as it jumped at me. Grace swung the arrow in her hand and connected with it. not doing much damage, but hitting it hard enough to change its course mid-air so it wouldn't hit me. Grace took 2 steps back and grabbed the shaft of the arrow with both hands. It was essentially a sharp stick, and she knew that, but it was better than being completely unarmed. I knocked the new arrow and turned to the beast, drawing the bow and sending ripping pain through my shoulder at the same time. Just as I turned, Grace met eyes with the spider and grabbed her head as the torrent of horrific images flashed through her mind. In the panic, I fired, missing the center of mass of the beast, but pinning 2 of its legs to the floor, immobilizing it. It let out a guttural scream of pain and switched its gaze to me. I tried to look away, but I was too slow, and our eyes met, sending pictures of torture and gore through my mind, like a mental tsunami crashing through an oceanfront city. As I became stunned, Grace was released from the creature's mental assault. She recovered quickly and lunged for the creature, burying the arrow still in her hands into its back. The creature broke eye contact with me as it let out another scream of anguish. Grace scrambled to her feet and backed away from the creature, and we both realized that what we thought were flames were nothing more than orange, bioluminescent hairs. They were nothing more than an illusion. A very convincing one, but nevertheless, still an illusion. I ran to the lurker in the doorway and ripped at the last arrow in its face, knocked it and painfully drew the bow back, took aim and fired. The screams of the spider creature suddenly stopped as the arrow pierced its neck, just below its skull, ripping through its throat and killing it. As it lied dead, Grace and I, breathing heavy, met eyes. "Maybe I'm not as shit with a bow as I thought," I said, dropping the bow to the ground and walking over to Grace, who was clearly still tense from the battle. She wrapped her arm around me, slowed her breathing, and whispered, "What the fuck is happening?" "I really wish I knew," I replied. "We need to get these bodies outside and get the door closed, so we don't let any more of that fog in," she said, as she let go of me and began pulling arrows out of the flame spider. So far, we hadn't noticed any actual problem with the fog other than the odd nature. It didn't seem to be dangerous in any way. That being said, I fully agreed with her. Didn't really feel like taking any chances with it. We got the lurker outside of the porch, and my wife grabbed the spider by its legs and threw it out the door and into the front yard. It hit the ground with a thud a few feet from the lurker. We closed and locked the door. I grabbed the fan from the basement, aimed it out the windows to purge the house of the fog as best I could. Grace opened the door to the steps leading upstairs to find both dogs waiting on the other side. We promptly ran to and began sniffing the 2 spots the bodies had been lying on the carpet. Both my wife and I went upstairs to check on the girls. Izzy had fallen asleep in a pile of stuffed animals for an impromptu nap. Addie had covered her with one of her blankets, and used the other to curl up next to her little sister and pass out as well. "Fog lurker," I say to Grace as we close the door behind her and let the girls sleep. "What?" "That's what you called it downstairs. Didn't have a name for them before. I like it. It fits," I responded. She smiled, but it quickly faded as we hear the dogs let out one bark each, then come running upstairs past us and into the bedroom. Grace and I look at each other, and then run downstairs. We saw the problem. Having our front door open as we fought the 2 creatures let their screams of pain alert others. None of the lurkers were present, but we saw at least 3 of the flame spider things walking in circles around the outside of our house. Grace and I looked at each other. Without a word, we set out in different directions, making sure all the blinds were closed and all the windows. After about an hour of periodic checking, the creatures left. And after we confirmed that there was none of them left around the house, my nerves settled and I realized I was really hungry. So I began to cook something for us all in the kitchen. Grace checked on the girls and then joined me in the kitchen to help get some food ready. We all ate, and we decided we had more than enough excitement for one day and gathered everyone upstairs for the night. "We need to get out of here. I feel like they know that we're here now," Grace whispered to me as we sat, watching the girls play quietly, to wind down for the day. I know. There was a lot of activity, a lot of noise today, but I think I have a plan, I said, as I wondered if my plan was even possible, or even if I had all the parts available. "Mommy, play Barbies with me, please," Addie said, as she raced over to Grace, Barbie in hand. Grace crawled over and played with her for a little while as I went to the bathroom to remove any bandages and see how much damage I had done to my stitches. We all gathered in our bedroom again as always that night, but instead of lying awake, as we had so many nights before. All of us slept hard, deep in a dreamless slumber, until we awoke the next morning. Day 22. After we got Addie and Izzy settled for breakfast, Grace asked me about what the details of my plan were. I realized that our conversation had gotten cut short last night due to Addie's request to play with Barbies. Knowing that we needed something to move the Humvees out of the way, we would have no way out of town. Also knowing that my truck would be unable to move them, I had remembered that just 2 blocks away was a farm equipment repair building that usually had some form of large, powerful farm equipment parked in front, one that would be able to move military trucks so that we could leave. Now, this was much longer of a journey than hopping the fence to get food from the neighbors. Also, I had no guarantee that there would even be any big tractors or equipment there. I mean, sometimes it's an empty parking lot. And if I made that journey just to be met with emptiness in the parking lot, I'd be screwed. And not to mention, if I'd be able to get that thing started, I mean, even if there was something there. There were so many unknown variables, yet it still seemed to be the only viable option. Why don't you take the truck and drive over there to see if anything is there? Grace asked, with considerable insight. Yeah, I thought about that. But I don't want to draw that much attention to myself before we're ready to go. You know, the truck is kind of loud, I replied. For this plan to work, I'm going to have to get over there. You know, start whatever I can, find a bulldozer, move the Humvees out of the way, all while you gather all the supplies you can and get the dogs and girls loaded into the van. Then meet me at the roadblock and get us out of here. That's a lot of steps. A lot that can go wrong, she said. Yeah, I know. But can you think of any better ideas? I replied, nearly begging for her to come up with a better idea. No, you're right. There aren't any better options, she relented. So when do we start prepping? Sadly, I think the sooner the better, since we have clearly attracted attention to our house, I said, referring to the parade of creatures that we had around the house last night. Let's gather stuff up in the house tonight. We can try and get it to the van in the morning. It seems like I see them walking around the least around midday, so that's when we'll plan to go. She nodded in agreement. The rest of the day went rather quickly. We packed together supplies, as if we would be living in the van for a week, loading food into boxes and coolers, clothes and diapers, dog food, electronics, cables. Everything we could need. We moved everything to the back door for preparations for our plan. With tensions high and nerves rattled in anticipation of how the plan would play out tomorrow, we went to bed. Hey there kids, it's me, Mrcreepypasta, and thank you so much for listening to tonight's story, whether it be an episode of something, or tonight's podcast, or tonight's YouTube. I hope all of you are staying safe in the current pandemic craziness. If you guys are missing out on some of the artwork from some of your favorite artists, you can always check out the description down below, where I'm linking over some of my friends who are not able to do conventions, seeing as all the conventions this year have currently been shut down. So if you're missing out on some of the incredible artwork you can normally get from them, a group of my friends, or a lot of different friends of mine, are all found in the description down below. And a very big thank you to all my Patreons, and you can always join them at patreon.com/Mrcreepypasta. People like Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Ken Lando Higuchi, Brianna Van Tine-Janzen, Chompski, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Sindee Barney, G Weevil 3, Diana Kraus, Stephen VanHuss, Chance Burnett, Tristain Pelton, Nico, TheGingerBroz, Dante Rowe, Raphael Rodriguez, Lastbladesong, Eliminator 86, Nebsky, SteampunkSinner, Kaleb Dougal, Daniel Poulsen, Sky Harbor, The Homeless Bird 93, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, Aaron Stormcrow, Barbara Macedo, Thomas Burgett, Azazel Rotten, Let's Get Scared, S-Man, Andrew Kirisuba Warnock, Bad Honey, Creepypasta Adam, Someone You Love, Brennan Wright, Said the King 56, and Somber Puppet. Thank you guys so much for your continued support, to all of you on Patreon, you guys that are down there in the description, and everyone else. And thank you all for listening and watching and being subscribed. Sweet dreams.